Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guild House. This is a weekly podcast in which I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the tabletop RPG and surrounding space. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Spencer Hibnick. Hello. Or
Hello.
Should I say pesto enthusiast?
I mean, at this point, the nature of living online is that people call me Spencer, people call me Pesto. My brain just processes it all the same.
So I get okay. I immediately have a question of the gate. So where did the pesto thing come from?
Listen, pesto's delicious.
Yeah.
I needed a username. It came to me. I used it. This was long before I went into TTRPG design. I had no idea it would become my brand, but I mean, I don't regret it.
It does feel like, almost like in the kind of like comedic films of like someone needing to give like a fake name and they're staring around the room for anything of inspiration. Just pesto, a pot of pesto have to be on standby. But no, yeah, well, so choosing pesto and then kind of naturally kind of segueing into the tabletop RPG industry. If people haven't necessarily heard of the pesto publications and kind of the things that you kind of get up to, what would you say is like the high level synopsis?
Well, I'm probably better known at this point as a tester rather than a creator. I've been a tester for MCDM, Kingdoms Warfare, the Illrigger, bunch of stuff for a couple of years. And I only recently branched out into tabletop role-playing design. So yeah, I mean, I've tested a bunch of stuff, MCDM as a senior tester. And then on a volunteer basis, I've tested for people like MT Black and 5e Trash and some dude named Matthew.
Yeah.
Not sure if you've heard of him.
Yeah, so again, we've had the pleasure to work together, and also was it looking at your kind of catalog as well. You've been working with was it Scott Matintlock on the Dune Forgotten Realms stuff.
Yes, I tested that too.
The Academy of Adventurers of Which I'm tackling the Gazetteer side of that product.
Oh, wonderful!
Yeah, so again, it's
we also share an editor, so very small world.
Yeah, it's so. My first kind of immediate kind of question out of the back is out the gate then is what was the kind of call to action for testing?
So I am a perennial volunteer. I've been a Wikipedia editor on and off for 15 years. I like to find interesting things to keep me busy. And way back 2018-ish, maybe, MCDM they'd just had a successful Kickstarter. They were going to stream the Chain of Acheron, their 5e campaign. And they said, hey, everyone in the MCDM community, we're looking for people who want to be Twitch moderators. So I said, okay, I'm going to be watching that anyways. I have some moderation experience from other things. I'll sign up. And at some point in 2019, they said, hey, MCDM community, we're looking for people to test this new class called the Illrigger. And I signed up to test that, and a couple of other people that were in the community and I all started testing at around the same time. And I think that was August 2019. So it's been almost 3 years. They brought me on as the contract. Originally, it was the lead tester when I was the only one. And then once they started bringing in other testers, it became the contract senior tester, because lead means management in video game land, and I'm not a manager. But that was April-ish. It's been less than a year. It's been almost a year that I've been a contractor, and so I've got my fingers in everything MCDM has made except for Strongholds and Followers.
Wow. So I must admit, so it's kind of fascinating because obviously having kind of brought you on as like a playtest of kind of one of my projects, I've kind of seen almost like the refinement of the process and kind of what I kind of loved is when we were kind of working together and stuff like that. After you kind of had the playtest for it was the Tome of Silence, the Excel sheet that you had, it was like, so I've done like a brief stint of like QA for so I did it for the games industry of some funnily enough, some Facebook slot games.
Ooh.
So like it was a doozy. I have was a story where I was there for like a few days, and on the end of like one of my first days there, I was testing like the auto spin feature. So you can say spin 100 times and then see what happens. I hit the max spin, the max auto spin, which is something like 999 spins, and I kid you not, 998 crashed. And it's one of the things where like I don't know what aspect of this is kind of like a repeatable bug. Does this mean I have to come back in tomorrow and do 999 spins? And they're like, yeah, you have to see if it works. But my brief gambling experience aside, what was your like, I guess, were you always kind of I guess your approach to kind of QA and kind of testing, was it always kind of that kind of rigorous? That's naturally kind of what you brought, or has this something that you kind of refined as you've worked closely with MCDM?
I mean, MCDM is where I got my start testing, and Lars, who is the MCDM employee that runs the testing, was the QA lead or senior QA manager or something for a video game studio, the one that a lot of the MCDM people came over for. So a lot of the structure was there, and I was blessed with learning the ropes in that kind of environment. But the spreadsheet that you saw is the work of that original spreadsheet from 2 years ago being refined by time in the trenches, because what works in video games doesn't necessarily work in TTRPGs. So, I mean, it's really just a method of being organized. And I'm much more of a details and making connections person than a memorization person. So the kind of analysis of, is this understandable? Does this look like it's going to work? That's much easier for me than say learning a programming language or a foreign language. So I don't know. I mean, what you saw was one person doing it.
Yeah.
We're at like 200 lines on the class we're working on from a half dozen people, and several iterations. So it can get really like dense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, having something to keep all your thoughts organized and be able to say, okay, what's been addressed, what hasn't been addressed, makes the whole process a lot easier.
No, 100%. And I guess, because I'm always curious, because I always feel like I've kind of spoken about this before, where like it feels like when you kind of get started in the tabletop like industry and stuff like that, it always feels like you kind of hit stages where first is you always start with like a solo project, and then maybe in your second project you're like, oh, maybe I should get like an editor or like a layout artist involved and stuff like that, or at those kind of like later stages where you think of like, maybe we should get this in the hand of kind of like play testers. And particularly with a lot of stuff that you've kind of done with, MCDM as well, you've done a good mix of both player classes, adventures, as well as also kind of like rule sets. So I guess I'm kind of curious, is like, how do you kind of like, I guess, approaches of playtesting differ depending on what you're working with?
Well, I mean, there's two different categories of content. There is the things that need to be actual play tested, and there are the things that need to be read through. And everything that gets actually play tested gets read through first. But the content doesn't actually really change the process very much. The things that you're looking for are a little bit different when it's a class versus a monster versus anything else. But when you're doing the read through, you're looking for things like, does everything make sense? Like, because just having anyone else that's not you read it, they will not have the benefit of what's in your head. They can only look at what's on the page. And we have one tester that speaks English as a second language. We have me, where I unfortunately had an experience with a player that was that guy. And so I have the eye of, okay, so how would someone that's terrible take this and abuse it? And how do we head that off?
Yeah.
So when you build a team of testers, which is a luxury you have on big projects that you might not have on smaller projects, you get a bunch of different perspectives. And so the read through is going to identify, well, it took me 2 or 3 readings to understand what this says. How do we make it clearer? Or this looks really cool, but it's going to be really hard to run at the table. So you can do a lot of work just by reading things. The more you test, the more products you've read, even if you haven't tested them, the more you've run at the table. You build up this experience of just being able to look at something and say, okay, this looks a lot like this thing that I had before, and these were the problems with this thing that I had before. So let's either tell the author this might be a problem, or if it's something that you need to test, let's test it and put that piece under strain and see if it breaks.
Yeah, I guess again, it's like almost like a sixth sense that you kind of build up over time of like this, again, drawing on kind of other kind of playtesting experience to kind of identify potential pain points before even getting to the point of like playtesting, because it kind of comes through.
And go. Please. I was going to say, when I actually run tests, I have this 2 or 3 page document that just goes over everything that I expect of the testers. Like, what platform are we going to use? How do you build your characters? What makes a good tester? What makes good feedback? Yada, yada, yada. And part of that is just a list of a very small number of things that you should be on the lookout generally for. Is it easy to understand? Does it run smoothly? And the last one I put on there is it fun? Because things can look really cool on paper, and then you actually get behind the table and it's just like, well,
yeah.
So
fundamentally, we're dealing with tabletop RPGs. Like, we're games, we're playing. It feels like, you know, a fun should be something of like a kind of core takeaway.
Yes, definitely.
And I guess one of the things I kind of do hugely respect about like playtesters in particular is if we take like the Ulriger, for example, like a whole new class built from the ground up. I can only imagine that like there's so many different like configurations where it's like, oh, it turns out it's perfectly fine in most, you know, traditional tables, but if it's, I don't know, like one Ulriger, 4 clerics, suddenly the game's, you know, or, you know, whatever kind of, and I guess it is kind of trying to work out where do you draw the lines technically of like, okay, well, this is, you know, going to be the main experience for the majority of players, and what falls under kind of like, okay, this was like a fringe case within our playtesting.
I would say you have a balance between testing and revisions, and it has a deadline that needs to go out. So at a certain point, there is a cutoff where you say, okay, it would be nice if we could tweak this a little bit more, but we could be tweaking this a little bit more for 6 months and it's otherwise ready to go out. So it's good enough. Yeah. And knowing where that point is, because every product has that. That balance, and knowing where that is important so that you don't get bogged down in the reeds. But I guess the real benefit of having a big testing team and going through several revisions is that you just tackle it in a bunch of different ways. So you're like, I had a product, my first solo release was the Spell Shaper Wizard, which is a geometry themed subclass.
Yeah.
The very first test I ran, one of my friends ran it and he dropped the spell in a way like I immediately knew, okay, this is not working the way that I thought it was.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing happens a lot in the first round of testing, and then you make some revisions, and then it happens a little bit less and you make some revisions. And then by the third round of the document, you've probably tackled all the big things.
Yeah.
With classes, you have a lot more fine tuning and back and forth, but you also have a lot more people that are tackling it. So you have more opportunities to see where things don't work. And like taking the Ulriger, for example, Matt wants to revise the Ulriger because there are problems with the class that really only reared their head, despite all the testing, after it came out. The crit fishing was not part of the design, but it's so lucrative to do that people are playing the class in a way that makes it more powerful and probably should be tuned. So 2020 something, there will be a revision to the Ulriger.
I mean, I guess obviously, even with like, you know, any amount of kind of editing or playtesting and stuff like that, it's hard to kind of compare with like, you know, once the product is released with the sheer volume of people picking it up and playing it. Obviously, in an ideal world, yeah, you like going back to kind of what you're saying, stuff like you could keep something in testing like forever, and maybe by the end of it and stuff like that. But there are always going to be, you know, like logistical issues of like this needs to eventually kind of be released. And yeah, it's kind of identifying the major ones, like again, immediately knowing, like, you know, you kind of like with spell shaping that, okay, this isn't the geometry I wanted. This is a slightly different shape of how things kind of shaped up. No, interesting. So I'm curious then, to before talking a little bit more about, you know, some of your like the creative side of like creating some of the projects on the testing front, what would you say is like your favorite and like least favorite part of that process?
I don't know if I have a favorite and a least favorite. I like seeing the improvements that happen through multiple revisions. Because those are lessons that I can apply to my own work. And I am definitely a better writer for having been exposed to 50 Arcadia articles written by many of the best names in the business and seeing, well, first of all, I see this is what really high quality work looks like. Second of all, I see this is what really high quality work looks like before it gets through testing and editors. I can do this.
Yeah.
It's hugely motivating to see that like the really polished work that you get at the end can be intimidating because you're comparing your first draft against something that has gone through a professional editor and most likely professional testers. So seeing what it looks like while it's being made makes the process a lot less intimidating.
Yeah, so being able to kind of almost like peer behind the curtain. It in no way does it necessarily like ruin the illusion, but you see, you know, all the cogs hearing and stuff. No, 100%. Yeah, I think it's the kind of experience of just being able to again, any kind of collaboration where you're working with against some amazingly talented people. You're just like, wow, it just wow, yeah, it kind of like blows my mind.
For least favorite. In every project, well, not every project, in any sufficiently large project, there are going to be things you feel strongly about that are not, that this is a bug, this needs to be changed. And when the author says no, and here's my reasoning, I'm fine with it most of the time. When the author says no, I feel like I want to take it in that direction. I think it'll work, and you just know it won't work. And then it comes out and it doesn't work. That's crushing, because like, absolutely, it is not my name on the byline. I am not responsible for those decisions. But you just, could I have pushed it a bit more? Could I have structured what I was saying in a different way? And we've been told, don't think that way. Your job is to identify problems. The author's job is to come up with solutions or decide that those things aren't problems. But it stings because, you know, I have a pride in the work that I do as a tester to bring issues to people. So
I imagine sometimes, again, along the issues of at least with some of the work and stuff like that, some of the issues raised are, I guess would you agree that they're somewhat subjective in nature?
Yeah, I mean, you run the gamut from very obviously mechanical and very obviously things like typos and some balance issues. This is very obviously a problem. And then it ranges. You get clarity things where I'll bring a bug and say, it took 2 or 3 readings. This probably could be worded this way or that way. And then you just get to like tone. Tone is a really subjective one. And there have definitely been bugs where we say, hey, you're trying to sell this really serious tone, and then you've got like a joke here, or you've got this NPC that just, the way they behave undercuts what you're trying to do. And so there's definitely subjective, and those are not the ones that bother me. The author has a voice, and the author should have a voice. It's the mechanical ones that I say, this isn't going to work, and I'm never going to publicly tell anyone, because that's not proper to do. I'm never going to tell anyone, oh, these are the things that I said won't work, and they don't work. I'm right. I would love to. I'm not going to. But yeah, I mean, those are the ones that sting. Where you know, okay, this isn't working. Can we fix it? And it goes to print with the thing that doesn't work.
I think there's always, as well, I think there's always been some of the things that I've come across as well is based on kind of feedback. There's always sometimes the case of like, it's almost things like where if I had the time or the words to like expand it out and stuff out. But like I'm at my word limit, and it's that case of like where do you draw the line of like if I wanted to kind of expand or stuff out, where do I cut it? But that's mainly coming from like a like adventure standpoint. Yeah, I don't know. It's for me is it's always scary handing my adventures off for playtesters. I don't think I'll ever get away from it. I think it's always that kind of like that default thing of like this is my child in a weird way. But it's honestly I don't think you necessarily like, again, running like an adventure yourself with like friends or gathering groups of that. I don't think adequately tests adventure product as well as handing it off completely to someone, because again you even if you don't always know the adventure back to front, even as you being the one who wrote it, but again you have that kind of like you do the things that you're kind of ad-libbing or kind of inserting in to make sure things flow better. There's always going to be kind of like pros and cons to that process, which funnily enough, speaking of kind of adventures and stuff like that, I would like to chat a little bit about Questmaster. Do you want to give for the people listening, what would you say is the pitch for this particular adventure?
Questmaster is a comedy one-shot that is an homage to the panel show, the British panel show Taskmaster. So I tried to capture the structure and the tone of what is essentially a comedy game show and turned it into a one-shot that you can run in 3.5, 4 hours. And I mean, it is the product of everything I've made that I'm most proud of, and it is the product of everything I've made that I've had the most people come and say, I have run this and I loved it.
Oh, really?
So absolutely 100%. It's the thing that I would recommend if you're going to check out any one of my products.
Well, I mean, as always with these podcasts, you can obviously check out the whole, Spencer's whole catalog. But was it literally? I guess was it the fact that you by any chance were you watching a lot of Taskmaster, and then it was?
I may have watched the entire. I think at that point it was 11 series in like a week, but it was also I signed up for the Writers' Workshop. And I have mixed feeling about the Writers' Workshop. I think it's an excellent thing for people that are coming in completely blind, or not completely blind, completely has never written anything before. I struggled a bit with the pacing of it. I wish there were some things that got into more details or that moved quicker, but it's definitely something I would recommend. But the structure of you have 1 month, or realistically, because it doesn't have you start writing immediately, you have 3 weeks to create an adventure. That really focused me, and Questmaster was my adventure workshop game. And the time limit is a constraint. The space limit is a constraint because they had a word count. And I've never met a word count that I didn't bash my head against. If you have a word count, I'm going to hit your word count, but it doesn't mean I can't say hello in less than 500 words. So I think part of why it's so tight is because I had those constraints. But yeah, it's, I can't say enough fun things about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I always do find that, particularly when it comes to like word restraints or restrictions, I feel like it definitely does in some ways. It does kind of increase your like creativity, because you're kind of now having to kind of hone in and kind of prioritize. Okay, what is the arguably the bare minimum, or the 2-3 things that I need to kind of capture most to make this Taskmaster kind of styled adventure kind of work. I'm curious then, in kind of the putting it together, what were obviously trying to capture the style of the show. What were some of the things that you kind of put the focus on of like, okay, well, this to perfectly kind of encapsulate Taskmaster, this is what I need to focus on?
So there were a couple of elements of the show that I honed in on as, if I can get these right, it will sell the product. One of them was the tone. I have my Alex Horn and my Taskmaster stand-ins, and they have banter between each other at the start of each quest. And so trying to capture that kind of banter to get people in the mood. The other part of it was designing quests that feel like they would be functional tasks. One of them is just a straight up, I'm going to take one of the best tasks ever and put it into Questmaster. And that is, there is a Song for a Stranger is the name of the task, and Taskmaster is like, here is this random person, ask a bunch of questions and use the information you've gathered to write a song about them. But of course, because this is a comedy product, the person that spoilers, the person they're asking questions about is a necromancer with a midlife crisis that's trying to reanimate his childhood hamsters or his childhood gerbils to recapture lost youth. So obviously it's not just like a regular person. But the element of Taskmaster that makes the show work is you're operating on an artificial time limit that doesn't give you enough time to plan. And you have absurd, the thing you're trying to do is absurd. So that naturally leads to absurd solutions. You don't have enough time to plan. The thing you're working on is already a bit crazy. The language is open to interpretation. So you've got this huge range of things that you can do to solve it. And there's a gotcha. There's like the very first quest is, again, spoilers, the very first quest, find a mimic. That is a gotcha. It is designed for people to, with the end of it's like, ah, crap, I should have thought of that. That's really clever. You don't want them to be upset. You don't want them to feel cheated. Once they realize what's going on, they're gonna like, oh, yep, that was totally there for me to find. And that does mean that some people are gonna think of that and find it immediately, and that quest is just not gonna hit the same as if you go through the whole thing and then at the end like, oh. But I mean, there's 4 quests in there. 1 or 2 of them are gonna hit well, and the other 2, as long as you enjoy yourself, I think you're gonna have a good time with the product.
I think this is like the thing when it comes to like the nature of comedy and stuff like that. It's you can't always, not every joke is gonna land with every kind of audience and stuff like that, and that's just the nature of the beast. But no, I'm a big fan of like Taskmaster myself. I watch a lot of episodes. I feel bad for Alex Horn. But
I don't feel bad for Alex. He created the show. He created the show. He's the one pulling the strings.
It's true. But the thing, I think, again, it's kind of funny, and in the sense that the challenges in the show and the things that you can kind of translate to like any kind of adventure and stuff like that is they are that almost confusingly simple tasks. Like, fill this up with water, or, like, don't get wet, or, any of these kind of like weird kind of, that it feels like just kind of putting into a fantasy setting. It really kind of like makes the players have to think in like 4D chess. It's like, okay, now I have magic. How can I use magic to maybe like fix or solve these simple kind of solutions? So to kind of tie in an earlier section we kind of talked about then, what was did you do much playtesting for Questmaster?
I run playtests of everything I produce. I also like to have other people run it because there's the virtues to being in the room. There's virtues to not being in the room. Going back to Spell Shaper Wizard, being in the room with that first test and seeing, oh, when I said you could turn a cone or a sphere into a line, I was assuming that the origin point would be south, and you just dropped a line in the middle of this area, not connected to anything. That's not how it's supposed to work. That is something that because it was in my head and not on print, me being in the room to see that it didn't work the way I expected it to, that is a bug that maybe it would have gone to print without being fixed if I wasn't there. On the other hand, the author not being there, depending on your group of testers, because like the people that I've been testing with a lot, who some of them have become my very close friends, they will tell me something doesn't work right to my face. But volunteers that don't know you, and maybe, for God's sake, for some strange reason, they shouldn't, but people who are intimidated about you, like by like, oh wow, I'm speaking to the creator, they might not give candid feedback or might cushion their feedback, and so the severity of how strongly they feel something is an issue might not get through. So I don't know how many tests it went through off the top of my head, I ran at least 2. I think I ran 3, and then a couple of other people ran them without me in the room. And that was across a couple of different revisions. So I ran the first test.
Yeah.
I saw some things. I did some tweaking, ran another test, other people running tests. I think it went through 2 or 3 levels of revisions, which is about what happens with Arcadia articles for MCDM. 3 levels of revision, editor revision, testing revision, second round of testing, final round of revisions, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I feel very strongly about A, that your testers should be credited, and B, your testers should get a free copy of it. So I or anyone else that owns the product can just go in and see how many testers there were and like divide that by 4 or 3. Some people tested multiple times, and that's how many times it was tested.
Yeah, I almost turning into like a math problem. It's like, okay, there's 35 testers. Let's do the quick. Like,
probably about 7 tests, 8 tests. Yeah.
Well, dude, that's quicker maths than I had. But no, 100%. And I think in fairness, I think almost kind of like, well, I kind of mentioned earlier about like doing the first test yourself. It does almost like it catches the kind of large structural ones, because immediately if you running it yourself are running into problems of that, you know that like the next person you kind of hand it off to, they're almost going to have like a 10 times worse time than you did, and you're the person who made the thing.
The other benefit to testing yourself is if you find yourself like, if I'm running something and I say, I'm gonna just change what it says right on the fly, then I know from running it, okay, it'll be a bit smoother if I do this. So then I can just make that what's actually in there for the next revision. Yeah.
So I'm curious then, obviously with the kind of the stuff you're making, you've got is it 2 adventures? Because so I've got the Blight of Brineburrow,
Brineburrow and Questmaster are adventures.
Then you've got Spellshaper Wizard, which is a subclass, or is it just
Wizard subclass? Yep.
And then lastly, the fantastic Oospell.
Yes.
Which is so it seems like again you've kind of got like a range of like it's well, okay. One, I was gonna say it's a bit of a guess, but are you a big fan of wizards?
I'm a big fan of casters. I like to have a lot of different options every turn, so I tend to gravitate towards casters. And that's not just in D&D. When I'm playing a TTRPG inspired video game, or I guess an RPG video game, I tend to go towards the caster or some other build that has a lot of options and combos and stuff like that. Otherwise I just get bored.
That fair kind of makes sense. And then so with the I'm trying to think of where to go. So it feels what I liked about the Spellshaper Wizard in particular and stuff like that is the fact that it kind of plays around in a very kind of like unique design space. The idea of like you kind of like touched on a little bit with was it like, like is it evocation with like the spell shaping, where it's like, oh, you're using areas of effects, but you're not hitting your friends, or what have you, stuff like that. Was the idea of the Spellshaper Wizard kind of stemming from that idea of like, it would be cool to do like a line fireball, or was it I'm just curious, what was kind of
the origin of that entire subclass was a single spell by Hannah Rose in Arcadia 7, which was Flurry of Icicles, which she had 3 different shapes. You could make this I think it was a cone or a cube or a sphere. I'm like, that's a cool idea. I've never seen that before. What if you had a whole class that could do that? Because like an evocation wizard can just exclude certain allies from being hit by their fireballs. But that's only on evocation spells, and that still makes your fireball a fireball. The thing about the spell shaper is not, their spells are not stronger. They don't get any benefits to any of the casting of any of their spells. They don't hit harder, anything like that. But the ability to change the shape to fit where the enemies are and where your boneheaded fighter who's running into the middle of the enemies right before you cast fireball is, that is what makes it powerful. And as you progress, initially you can go from, I'm going to take a cube to make it a line or a sphere or a cone. And then you can, at a certain point, okay, I'm going to make it a donut because I want to cast fear and the fighter is in the middle of the enemies. So I'm just going to have them be in the hole in the donut.
Yeah.
Things like that. So I took that idea that I saw that I thought was really cool and I ran with it.
Yeah, no, in fact, it's awesome, and I think there have been so many times where, again, just looking through any kind of like product and stuff like that, where it feels like a small little paragraph. You go, you know what, I can make a whole thing out of essentially just one aspect that's kind of been presented here. And what's kind of awesome about Arcadia is each magazine is it's crammed full of all these different like inspiration kind of points. Yeah, interesting. And then I was it something similar with the fantastic ooze spells? Sorry, every time I get the chance to say fantastic, I'm gonna take it.
I have no idea where fantastic ooze spells came from. I don't remember anymore.
It's oozed out of your mind. You just
yes. Definitely I knew relatively quickly that an ooze cat was going to be the thing on the cover.
Yeah.
As soon as I had that designed, I'm like, yeah, that's something that no one else has done before, or at least that I've seen, and that's very evocative. I'm gonna put a cute little ooze ocelot on the cover.
And it's cute. I'll give you that.
But other than that, no idea where the idea for that one came from.
So then, I guess, seeing as we're kind of working your way like down on stuff like that, with spells. I'm curious about how you kind of went about the I guess the playtesting aspect of that. Was it that you just kind of like, again, I mean, that feels like something like within your home game you can sometimes get away with giving like magic items that essentially cast the spells, or you just say, hey, here's a wizard spell that you've researched the fact, or did you kind of stick with the kind of like, no, let's have like an isolated playtest session?
I was all isolated playtest sessions. I ran a few, a couple of friends ran a few, and every full caster has, actually I think every type of caster has at least some spells on the list. So I gave the full list of 12 spells to everyone, and then depending on whether they had a druid or a ranger or a cleric or what have you in their party. Actually, I don't think there's any for cleric. Cleric might be the only one that doesn't.
I mean, the clerics, they don't yell oozy.
Yeah. But warlocks and sorcerers and wizards and druids, they bards, yeah, definitely bards.
Yeah, bards are oozy.
Yeah.
I do like, it's like the test of like, is this subclass oozy? Yes or no? And you just think, paladin? Nah, they're not oozy. Druid are oozy.
Well, I mean, there's a note in there, like if you decide that you're going to be a cleric of, say, a slime god or something like that, just talk to your DM and say, hey, I think this list would work for my cleric, and they're probably going to say yes. I mean, the benefit of rigorous testing is that it's not going to break anything.
Yeah. So I'm curious, so of the was it 12 spells you've kind of got there, is the ooze, summoning the ooze ocelot your favorite, or is there like a spell that you have like a soft spot for?
There's a couple of them. I love one of the higher level spells is just there's a historical event that actually happened in Boston in like the 1800s where a molasses tank broke and flooded like several blocks. Okay. So I have a spell that's just like, I'm going to open a cone, 120-foot cone of molasses that just knocks everyone back and makes the area sticky. There's also gelatinous wall, which is a great way to throw off any pursuers, because now all of a sudden they're stuck in a wall of gelatinous cube while you run away.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with that one.
No, I was gonna say, it feels like it does most of the things you expect from like a wall of force, but it's just a lot more goopier. Yeah. No, also, and yeah, fair. I guess it like when it is hard to kind of sometimes pinpoint where the inspiration kind of strikes for some projects. But it sometimes it is always that simple of like, you know what, having like a core central theme of like ooze, or I did like a subclass the other day where I was like playing around with paladins, and I was like, you know what, like being able to like throw and smite, like do the throwing hammer smite and stuff like that you should be able to do that earlier. You shouldn't have to like wait to get so far until you be able to like throw a smiting hammer and stuff like that. And that was it. And that was the whole gimmick that you kind of like ran with. But it's kind of nice because you end up with like almost like very small, compact things. You don't have like I've definitely had some projects as well where it's a case of like I almost sometimes lose track of like what the core idea is, and then the feature bloat that ends up with like too much different things are going on. What to kind of I guess round things off, because again the only one we haven't kind of spoken about is the blight of the blight of Brineburrow. Is that intended to be a tongue twister, or is it just me?
No, it's just like brine as in saltwater, burrow. It just seemed like the kind of thing that townsfolk would name their little fishing village.
Yeah, they're pretty. Some of them are pretty on the nose, aren't they? Like in reflection, like years after the date. What was the inspiration behind this adventure then?
The picture on the cover is of, and I will butcher the pronunciation because I don't speak German. It's like a Pilferstorch. It's a migratory bird that flew down to Africa, was shot with an arrow, survived, flew back to Germany, died in Germany, and that bird and other ones like it were how Europeans learned that birds migrated. Because wait a second, this arrow is not from around here. So that picture,
just between this and the Boston story and stuff like that, it feels like you've got like so much like real world lore like weaved into this.
I mean, that one I got lucky. I saw the image that's on the cover of that. I saw on Reddit's TIL today. I learned like, oh, okay, a ghost, a vengeful ghost of a Pilferstorch. I could do something around that. And at the time I was just getting started, this was October, November-ish, maybe a little earlier. I wanted to grow my mailing list. So I thought to myself, oh, I'll just gift everyone a stat block. It spiraled out of control from there. Bloat creep, feature creep, what's that? It has a sea shanty now. It's a full adventure with a sea shanty and a cool monster and a couple of items. And it was a valuable lesson in setting your feature list before time and not just throwing cool things in. I almost preempted this with me talking about like my tangent and stuff out for the blight to literally go through a similar kind of journey. So I guess I'm kind of curious then. So what, obviously with like a spectral bird, I can definitely see you going, and again a more similar like the lines of like the Questmaster, where there's some comical aspects of it. It's a ghost bird. It's not. Or did you kind of lean in the opposite side of like, no, we can actually make this ghost like a significant kind of threat with like a eerie story behind it? It was definitely a significant threat. One aspect I didn't mention is that it was a Halloween release. Yeah. Like it is a little bit too powerful for a low level party. But then again, you sort of get that anytime you're dealing with undead before you have magical weapons. It's got the same resistances as a regular Spectre does. So you need to prepare yourself, and it's going to be a nasty opponent. But I mean, it's a solo battle, so 4 or 5 players against one creature, they're going to probably win. Someone might spend half the battle unconscious, but they got a good story at the end of it.
And so was it literally a case of like, after kind of statting up this, like, okay, well, let's see how we can kind of, turn this, and then this impaled bird into like a stat block. And so was it after you kind of complete that stat block that you like, that I was about to say there's some legs to it. And again, I feel like if people haven't seen the bird, they won't know how leggy this bird is. But was that literally like essentially the turning point? Or was there kind of like an outside influence of like, no, maybe I want to do an adventure now?
I knew there needed to be some plot around it, because just giving people a stat block with no context for how to use it, I don't think that people are going to use it. But giving them a quest hook, like, hey, there's this bird that's in pain. It died from this arrow that it's been carrying around, and now it's terrorizing a village. That's the kind of thing that a DM could just like, okay, I'm going to take that hook. I'm going to put in some other stuff. Maybe going to change Brineburrow to this village that they've been to before. that kind of thing. So I always knew there was going to be some padding around the stat block.
Yeah.
But as I went, I kept adding things and adding things and adding things. And at a certain point, I was inspired to write a sea shanty, which basically explains everything indirectly.
How did you find writing a sea shanty? Is it like, are you a sea shanty connoisseur, or is this more
No, it just felt right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my mom was like, I didn't ask it, but I was like, how much was the sea shanty play tested? Like
the sea shanty, a couple of people that ran it ran the sea shanty. And the groups all pretty much got what was going on, because the story in the sea shanty is ultimately parallel to the story of the bird. And the solution in the sea shanty, like what ultimately happened to the sailor that it's talking about, is the same thing you need to do with the bird. Yeah.
It's just like almost like Titan. Like you could have like the sea shanty be completely unrelated at the start of the adventure as like a hook that the party just hear. What I love in particular is sometimes that appeal of like writing almost like completely like setting agnostic like adventure content, where like you kind of mentioned like the fact that it could work easily in any kind of location, and just even like from just a story hook to now have it that any kind of DM can literally just take the adventure and just plop it wherever they need to. Yeah, I think that's sometimes because a lot of the stuff I've been doing has been almost like gripped tightly within the Forgotten Realms for posting on the Dungeon Masters Guild. So every now and then that's like, you know what, let's step out of the Forgotten Realms for a little bit and just let people take adventure that can go and kind of be used anywhere. Wow. Okay. Cool. Well, then I guess to round things off about the like your writing experience and everything, then the same sort of question about what your favorite and least favorite part of the writing process is.
Honestly, part of it is coming up with ideas. I have way more ideas than I'm ever going to write. I like to joke that I just spin the wheel. I shoehorn kobolds into everything. But I love testing my products because creating something and then running it and then seeing people enjoy it is really fulfilling. Yeah. I love testing the products. I love sending it off to the editor, who for all my solo releases has been Sabriel, who I know you've worked with.
Yeah. And Dame Sabriel.
Yes, Dame Sabriel.
Officially damed.
Yes. And then I like releasing it because the juice is other people are experiencing your product and running it and they like it. I mean, if writing all this serves no purpose if it's just going to sit on your hard drive. Yeah. So definitely, I mean, it's sort of a cheap answer, but
no,
my products.
Yeah. It's kind of like you say, it's fulfilling. It's like, you know, anytime you see like the notification like thing, your product's got a review, and it's like these people who like I don't know, I haven't I haven't coerced them into buying it. They have their own, they've gone, they bought it, they've had a good time. That's more than you kind of asked for. But then what about on the other side of the coin then, about your like necessarily least favorite?
Marketing. 100% it's marketing. I am terrible at marketing. Talking about cool stuff, easy. The ask, I'm terrible at the ask. Buy my stuff, please. This is the only time I'm going to ask because like I hate doing it. I really hate doing it. Yeah. Quote retweeting other people's stuff, talking about how cool it is, great. But I don't know. I mean, it's just a psychological barrier I have that it's going to hold me back. Yeah. But at the same time, like,
yeah, I think I don't know what it is, but I think someone in like the approach to social media and stuff like that, it feels weird because it does feel like with each kind of like promotional post, it feels like you're nagging people. Even then, it's not. And then I've mentioned this a few times before and stuff like that, but like the problem with marketing particularly is the fact that technically it's never done. No, like, there's no rest of them. Like even if you released something 2 years ago, you can still market it. It just depends on like how hard you kind of want to go. But yeah, I think what I do like about at least particularly like the drive-through / DMsGuild model is the fact that like as products have a longer shelf life, the steady drip feed of like meddling gives you kind of like an incentive, like, hey, it's, you know, it's a copper now, hey, it's a silver now, and stuff like that. And that feels like a natural way to kind of, you know, celebrate the success, as well as kind of like remind people that X, you know, X product still exists. But no, I think I'm 100 with you on that one. Which this is why marketing's, it's an employable skill. This is why people have market departments.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, then I guess to kind of pull back and then look over kind of everything that you've kind of done then, has there been kind of like a particular choice that you've made in your journey that like I guess you're like particularly proud of, whether that is from like a way you kind of conduct testing, or if that is like a way you've kind of, tackled like a design problem in one of your products?
Can I say an entire product? Because like,
no, by all means.
I've already gone over this. I think Questmaster is it's not a magnum opus because I still have a long career ahead of me, but like that's the one where everything clicked. Yeah. I think I nailed the tone. I think I nailed the design. I think the only thing I would change is that I would do another one so that like Matt Colville has threatened to do an MCDM convention once the pandemic abates. I would love to have entirely new quests and run that live at a convention, because in Questmaster, the party is competing against 4 groups of NPCs. At a convention, you can just have 5 groups of players competing to do these same ridiculous quests. And I think that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think as well, it kind of does, it lines itself up for like almost like expansion packs.
Yes.
Is that something that you're kind of like entertaining the idea of? I
mean, right now, I'm working on other things. I have a long list of things that are interesting to me. Yeah. But if a quest idea pops up into my head and like, yeah, this will work, then Questmaster 2 would probably bump up to the top of my list pretty quickly.
Fair. And sometimes it is nice to literally have that kind of like leeway to be like, okay, it's like I've got like, what is it, like 5 out of 10 like brewing ideas and stuff like that. Once I hit like 10 out of 10 ideas, that's when I can like turn things on and, you know, kind of chip down and refine those. I've got like a similar case of like where it's there's been times where you literally have that one shower thought that's like, okay, I was going to do this today, not anymore. I'm starting a new project. It's one of those days. Awesome. And then I guess in a more reflective note then, over kind of everything you've done, what's the lesson that maybe you wish you learned sooner?
There's 2 of them. One is perfect is the enemy of the done, which I think is a very common lesson that everyone in the TTRPG space knows going in, but has to learn the hard way. There were times I stayed up until 2 a.m. working on one paragraph. And while ultimately the paragraph came out better, staying up until 2 a.m. was not a good use of my time. The other lesson, and this is one that I think if we as a community do a better job, we can spare new people from having to learn, is that getting off of the ground is really hard. There's no good onboarding process. You wind up piecing together information from blog posts and from the documentation of sites like DriveThruRPG. And if you're lucky enough, you know people already in the community and can ask them questions. But the thing that I would tell people that want to get in is you need to budget time and mental energy for getting all the nuts and bolts set up, getting your store page set up, getting everything that you need to do on the payment end, where's the money going to go, all that stuff. And that can't be the same time and mental energy that you're using for creating products. You need to assume you're going to spend 15, 20 hours and it's going to be frustrating and it's not going to make you any money and it's not going to, you're going to question a lot of your decisions. And that is just the getting everything set up, making sure that you have your workflows and all of your accounts and everything in order. And it would be really nice if there was just one blog post to rule them all. It was just a checklist of go here, do this, put this paragraph in your text, do that, sign up with this service, yada, yada, nuts to bolts, soup to finish. But that doesn't exist yet. And I don't think that I'm the right person to create it because I've only been at this since October.
And I think as another unfortunate way is at least with the tabletop RPG is there are so many different avenues you can go. I mean, like the start to finish process from starting and releasing on itch is different from drive through, is also different from the DMs Guild. So it feels like I think you are right. There are a lot of hurdles, and that's why I think in some ways I definitely do respect things like what you mentioned before, the storytelling collective, about at least having some structure from getting people and kind of easing them through that process. But yeah, I think as well that we can only benefit from more on ramps for a wider range of kind of creatives, to kind of go about the journey however they want to go about it. I honestly, I'm trying to think of like who we could point to and just be like, they'd be good to write that resource, and we could politely badger them into making.
I mean, I have a short list. At the top of that short list is James Intricasso, but I mean, I think that like he's a lich that feeds off of helping people enter the community and lifting people up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, does James sleep anymore? Which actually, speaking of speaking of James in particular, but no, people kind of in the community is like a bit of a segue. Obviously a lot of your work has kind of been kind of working with like getting involved in the tabletop RPG industry, and particularly MCDM. Who would you say are, I guess, some of the figures like in the tabletop RPG community that are like points of inspiration for you?
I mean, obviously James and Matt Colville, but like, how much time do we have? Let's see. The great thing about working at Arcadia or testing stuff on Arcadia is I get to see so much so much really cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we're on to testing issue 18 or 19 now. So I've seen like 50, maybe more articles. The workshop watches by Leon Barilaro, great adventure. Periodic Table of Elementals by Mackenzie de Armas. I have put every class that MCDM has released has gone up against those elementals because they are just great monsters that push your party in ways that a lot of monsters don't. The Chained Library by Kat Evans is just a really evocative setting. 100% it inspired a big project I'm currently working on. Goldmonger subclasses by Carlos Cisco is the first time I've ever been interested in playing a druid. So like, I just see so much cool stuff. Yeah. And you pull bits and pieces from everything you encounter, whether that's Arcadia or other stuff that you see on the DMsGuild, or core products or TV shows or books. So you get your inspiration from a lot of places, but definitely I feel like it's been a benefit to work on Arcadia and see so much cool stuff by so many cool people.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an absolute blessing. Like, I think back to when it first started. It's like, okay, it's going to be 3 issues, and we're just going to test the waters from there. And now here we are, like going up to come on 18 and stuff like that. So
yeah,
no, it's honestly, yeah, I feel like it feels like, again, for the longest time, it touches on, was it the old Dragon magazine? It has that same energy and buzz to it. That it feels like, again, for the recent years, we've just been lacking something like that, and it's been perfect. And again, we know for a fact it's been made all the better with your involvement.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice. And then I guess speaking to kind of, I guess, round things off, because looking at the time, so we've done it. We've managed to survive. But before leaving, obviously you mentioned you've got some coals in the fire. What's some of the cool stuff that you're working on that you can talk about? And obviously, where can people stay up to date with everything?
So the one that I can talk about, I'm almost ready to send to testers, is a collection of aquatic kobolds or seabolds. MCDM is coming out with a monster book, and they're going to Kickstarter it. And part of that Kickstarter is going to be a free packet that has samples of their design. And a lot of the design decisions that they made, which I can't talk about yet until the Kickstarter, were really inspiring. So I thought, I like the direction that they're taking monsters in. Matt's definitely said on stream that clearer roles for monsters, and being able to, like, he really liked in 4th edition, this one's an artillery, and this one's a get up in your face meat tank, and this one's a stealthy, and so I ran with that design. I've got a bunch of kobolds that are all, I mean, again, Kobolds are my default.
I was going to say, it feels like the under the ocean is one place is that you're safe from kobolds, but now it seems like you're trying to rectify
not anymore.
them.
And they're brine water, lightning, seashell, that sort of inspiration.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about those. I'm working on hopefully final revisions on a really, really large project for a publisher. I can't talk about it yet. I'm hoping that it will see the light of day this year, but that publisher has a lot of things on their plate, and so I'm not 100% sure what the timeline is or what it's going to look like. But I've been working on that for the better part of a year now. So I'm really excited for people to see that. And yes, it has kobolds in it.
Like the timeline for certain like tabletop RPG, they're both like a blessing and a curse. Like you have the projects where it's just like it's a blur from start to finish, and you have the ones where it's like I don't want it to see the world. It's been a while, but that's the nature of the beast. And yeah, obviously, where can people obviously hear about, as and when you announce these things?
So, I mean, I suppose you could carve a ring of eldritch runes out of pesto and try to summon me. But probably the easier way would be to follow me on Twitter. I'm at Pesto Enthusiast, all one word, on Twitter. Once you're there, there is a pinned tweet that has my website, which is pestopublications.card.co, I believe.
And as always, they'll be linked to all of these in the description.
Yeah. And right there in Twitter, there's a link to join my mailing list. Light of Brineborough went out for free to everyone that was on my mailing list. And when I have some bandwidth to give out more free stuff, I'm definitely going to do it. So yeah, definitely follow me on Twitter. Subscribe to the mailing list so you're the first one to know about whatever kobolds are next. MCDM's working on a psionic class. Bet we're going to see some psionic kobolds out of me.
At least this way, again, with no pesto is harmed in following you on Twitter at the very least. So you can save it for your actual using it for food and stuff like that.
Yes.
But no, honestly, Spencer, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to sit and have this chat. It's been delightful. It's awesome to kind of again to steal my own words from earlier, peek behind the curtain of testing, and I'm sure the people listening again are going to have appreciate the valuable insight you've given.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Welcome back anytime. I must admit, this is the year. This was it, third year doing the podcast. I'm going to start getting repeat guests, and I'm going to start making them do almost like Taskmaster design challenge. I'm going to take inspiration. But no, other than that, I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. It should be mid-April when this comes out, so I might have some things. I don't know. This is the problem with recording them too far early. There's some things that I can talk about and can't talk about. Maybe they're out. Who knows? Check in the description if they are. But that brings me to the final and arguably my favorite question, which is how do you end a podcast?
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you again for having me on. Second of all, I have a speech. It takes a village to create a TTRPG writer. I 100% would not be here without the mentorship and the time of a couple of people. James Dewar, Von Ruski, one of the other testers, who relentlessly prodded me into submitting my stuff and pitching my stuff until I actually did it. James Intricasso has given me so much excellent advice on writing and on the industry. Nick Despain, who is one of the artists at MCDM, taught me everything I needed to know about writing an art brief. Laura Hirschberner, I sent her a message saying, hey, your website design is really cool. How did you do it? She sent me the code. That's why our websites look so much similar. And then like Matt and Lars at MCDM, because testing at MCDM really has opened up so many doors, exposed me to so many cool people. And I definitely look forward to being able to repay the favor one day and be the person that talks to other people about whatever, whether it's testing or breaking into the industry or the things that I've learned. The rising tide rises all ships. So definitely look forward to being able to return the favor to the community one day. So hit me up.